Hello there, and welcome to Journey to Recovery. We appreciate you listening. Our podcast today is called Addiction, Accepting the Help You Need. Today we'll learn strategies to turn resistance into willing acceptance, cooperation, and lasting change. Our host is Dr. Hal Baumchen, a licensed clinical psychologist and licensed alcohol and drug counselor. He's an author, speaker, and clinician with over 30 years of counseling experience. I'm here today along with Tim Bode and our host, Dr. Hal Baumchen. Hey guys, are you willing and ready to get started?
I am.
Yeah, I think so. We are talking about willingness and acceptance today. We started this topic last week, so it's good to get back to it. We've got a little bit different emphasis today.
Yeah, talking about accepting treatment, accepting help with less resistance, right? Letting go of the need to control everything when you do get to help.
Right.
Why are people able to admit they have a problem with drugs or alcohol and still have difficulty admitting they need help or treatment?
I think there's a little mistake in their judgment here. When you need to get help with your addiction, hey, that treatment's going to take time and energy and effort and, boy, take me out of life for some time. And so they look at the problem of treatment and they compare all the difficulties and all the costs associated with treatment and then compare that to their perfect life, which they didn't really have.
Right.
So I think that's kind of a misjudgment here. You should compare the time that treatment takes with how wrecked your life was. I lost my job, my home, my wife, my dog. She left me the cat, took the kids with her. And so you look at all the consequences that are going along with your addiction. Don't just see your life as perfect and then treatment is the problem.
So if I didn't have to do treatment, my life would somehow go on in a serene and calm and beautiful way without any difficulties, problems, or costs.
That's exactly the mindset. I think people don't really get those words out, but that's what they're thinking. Exactly.
So is this the mindset filled with denial and minimization that we were talking about in the last podcast?
That's right. I think so. That I don't want to go to treatment. I don't need treatment. I do have a problem, but it's not very severe.
So how are those reservations started, and what do you hear from clients?
I hear I don't need treatment. I can stop whenever I want. You drink too. Why can't I? I can quit whenever I want to. I've cut way back. I used to drink a lot, but now I've cut back. So I hear things like that, Gaylen.
Yeah. You've talked in the past about clients who had a long history of legal problems.
I think we mentioned a guy on the last podcast who had been in jail like 25 times.
Yeah. Do those types of problems factor into any kind of resistances to treatment?
I think resistance often has a component of blaming other people. So I live in a stupid county, or the cop had it in for me, or, that was unfair. They were arresting everybody who was driving on the sidewalk today, and that's profiling, and profiling is unfair.
Yeah, right. A lot of blaming going on.
Absolutely. Yes, there's a lot of blaming going on. I've learned to expect that, and yet I try very hard not to be angry or disappointed with somebody who wants to project blame outward. And when someone speaks like that, really I think that's the addiction talking. Mm-hmm. That's what the addiction does. That's how the addiction sounds.
Forcing someone probably into better behavior doesn't work very well, does it?
No. Holding a gun to someone saying, you will love me, that doesn't work, of course, and demanding treatment and demanding cooperation. I think it does help to say, we need you to cooperate here a little bit, and failure to cooperate will have consequences. So you have a choice, but, and think it through how you want to play this, but cooperation, being willing, accepting, all that's really important here.
Mm-hmm. If we could go back to blaming just for a minute, when someone enters treatment, are they taking responsibility for their own actions? Is that what that means?
And I think they're not. I think at first we hear they're blaming other people in the system, or blame the system, and blaming family members, blame their circumstances, blame their employer. the economy, the environment, the nation, the county, and 1 million other things. I think there's a lot of blaming going on. And perhaps the addict is saying, in essence, my use is understandable because of the difficult circumstances that I've been going through. And you'd use too if you'd lived the life that I have.
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit last time, but do you get resistance about the treatment services or the treatment center itself?
Yeah, could I just come 2 days a week, or because treatment is inconvenient and it's I really don't need treatment and I don't have money and you guys just are taking my money from me. So I do hear a little bit about that. I won't know anyone in the group, or
How about treatment takes too long?
yeah, sure. Treatment takes too long and I'm not going to get anything out of it, and I've tried treatment before. So again, we want to encourage somebody to accept and receive the help they need.
Like you said, Hal, I've heard patients say they want to come just a couple days a week or just a week or two.
Or that they want a vacation during the middle of treatment?
That happens in the mental health group, and I've heard it happen in the intensive outpatient treatment program for co-occurring disorders that we have. Like, I'm going to start treatment, and then I'm going to need a couple weeks off to go to Hawaii or Fargo or wherever it is, That's probably not the best way to do treatment. You really need to take it serious. This is a big problem in your life, so let's take this seriously.
And that's actually in their best interest, right?
Right. Yep. They need to be willing to get the help they need.
Yeah, can you talk more about that, being willing?
That's the key part of acceptance. When people feel forced to do something, like we mentioned earlier, feel pushed into it, they most often resist. When a probation officer makes a demand, or when a spouse gives an ultimatum, when an employer says you can't work until you get treatment, I think all of those things get very close to kind of pushing somebody. And when a client feels pushed, they sometimes get resistant.
Yeah, it often creates resistance, right? Bitterness, resistance.
Resentments,
Resentment.
absolutely.
Yeah, I can see where feeling forced into something would create those hesitant feelings and resistant actions. However, aren't most people forced into a treatment setting?
True. It's true that you have to come to treatment, I suppose. But I like telling people that as soon as you cross that threshold, now you can make a decision to stay or go. The back door isn't locked. And the front door, for that matter, isn't locked either. So you can leave treatment. Now, again, there's consequences for that, but you try to get it in your mind, I'm not forced. I'm choosing to stay. Mm-hmm. I will get something out of it. I can start again. It's my choice, my decision, my will.
And make a decision to cooperate. Choose to get better.
Yeah.
Decide to actually go to treatment.
Yep. And stay there and get the most out of it that you can.
It sounds like it isn't a matter of trying to change the treatment center or the treatment itself as much as changing your own attitude about treatment.
If a client is willing to go, they'll be much more cooperative and certainly less resistant, right?
Right. And, back to Tim's point, it is tough to change the treatment center. So being willing to go and making those changes inside of yourself are going to work far better. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So is it helpful for a client to look at the reason he or she came to treatment?
Yeah, and consider the primary reason, that chief motivator, that why do you want to do the hard work of treatment or the hard work of recovery? Well, I want to raise my kids or something like that.
Yeah. So what if a client refuses to cooperate? If they aren't willing, they can't come to terms with the need for treatment, what happens then?
Well, oftentimes they're just miserable because they are there, they didn't leave, but they're not cooperative and they're not getting much out of it. And so it is the worst of both of all situations. Mm-hmm. You're there and you're bitter about it.
Resentful, uncooperative, resistant, belligerent.
Yeah. The uncooperative client often argues with the staff, finds fault with the treatment center, complains about the food and the bed, and is judgmental of other clients. The clients like saying to one another, watch your own bobber, which I think is really kind of fun. I fished a little bit, and I know what that means. Keep your eyes on what you're supposed to do and not be judging somebody else. And those kinds of things, if you can watch yourself, watch your own mood, your disposition, your attitude, you're going to get more out of treatment.
So what kind of consequences follow that bad attitude that we've been talking about?
A hard heart doesn't soak much up. And so I think a resistant and defiant client doesn't get much out of treatment. That's unfortunate. But it's the client who's willing and cooperative who really makes some progress.
I'm assuming that resistant client also doesn't make friends with staff or other clients.
Right. And some clients are there, they really want to get better. And so that person who's bitter and resentful, defiant and oppositional, that's poisonous. That's like a rotten apple, and they're afraid of that. That's a good thing to see, actually. Like, I'm not going to hang out with that guy. He's going to drag my recovery down.
But at the same time, I suppose there are times when that client does find someone else who's like-minded, and they all work against the program.
Right. Yeah. And, as a professional, Gaylen, I kind of hate it when that happens. Like, oh, no, now he's found that guy, and they're going to be bad for each other. They're going to drag each other down, and it's going to be tough for the other guys in the treatment program or the women in your treatment program.
So worst case scenario, what happens if somebody absolutely refuses to get anything out of treatment?
Well, bad things happen, I think. If the client absolutely refuses to cooperate, then maybe he or she will have to leave treatment, maybe go to a higher level of care or a different level of care. And sometimes the probation officer, if there's one, will get involved and say, why don't we just take the client to jail? They were given a choice, do treatment or go to jail. They came to treatment as though all they needed to do was serve the days. But that's more like jail. All you need to do is serve the days. But in treatment, you need to cooperate with the program. So.
If not, they end up in more trouble.
Yes, absolutely right.
So I think it's clear that it's much better if the client in the treatment program cooperates.
Yep. And feeling forced to cooperate isn't really cooperating. Acceptance, cooperation, and compliance need to be done willingly.
Right.
For the co-occurring disorder client, that means admitting there's actually more than one problem.
Yeah, you got the mental health problem. We've talked about this on this program many times. So you have mental health and substance abuse or chemical health problems going on at the same time. We try to treat both of those at the same time. So cooperation, acceptance, and willingness in this regard would mean accepting my mental health problem and the need for treatment for my mental health problem and the need for substance abuse treatment as well.
Not only does the client then need to come to terms with the problem, but also accept how the mental health problem and addiction has affected their life.
Sure. And so asking those questions, how has your mental health problem contributed to your addiction? How has your addiction made your mental health problem worse? How have those things made your life worse? Why do you need treatment? I think that's a really helpful place to start.
So to say it a different way, acceptance of the problem means honestly admitting that you're really struggling and then coming to terms with how serious it really is.
Right. So make abstinence your goal and mental health treatment your goal so that mental health treatment and substance abuse treatment do two major things, reducing symptoms and preventing relapse. Coming to terms with that's going to be necessary.
So in other words, laying out your recovery goal is an extremely important part of the whole process.
Right, and being vague and saying, like, I want to get better is not specific enough. You're not defining the goal in terms where you can go to work on it.
And you, as we've talked about, you have to be willing to accept help.
This is important. As you accept the problem, you come to terms with the appropriate goal, and you acknowledge that you need help. That's what really sets you up to make some progress here. And you can get help from treatment professionals or from counselors, even your probation officer, AA members, group support, church, a higher power, a sponsor. So a lot of different areas where you can reach out and get some help. It provides for you accountability and some stability and structure in your recovery program.
So you'll need help in mental health and chemical dependency recovery.
Right, got to have them both, or one will slip back on you and cause trouble in the other one, Gaylen.
Yeah, and in other areas too, right? Like housing, transportation, jobs, finances, relationship guidance, all those things.
Right, yeah. So, wow, you overwhelmed me, man. But that's exactly what happens. Yeah, you need help and structure and assistance in all areas. Grab the help that's available and be willing to receive it.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remind our listeners that admitting that you need help is not a sign of weakness. It's a hallmark of a strong person, and it's a necessary strategy for that long-term successful recovery.
Right. Yep.
So instead of rehearsing hesitancies, resistances, and reservations, what would you suggest would be an alternative?
Right. So your question's a good one. Instead of just complaining and going over all the reasons I don't want to get help, what could you do? And I like writing positive statements or acceptance statements. You could learn a few or write a few of them down and rehearse them. It would actually be helpful.
Yeah, let's give our listeners some examples.
Well, one of them is I can try again, or I can make up my mind about this, or I'm willing to be different.
How about I'm making progress?
That's one of my favorites. It's just a simple one. And when I drop my keys, instead of saying I'm an idiot, I often say I'm making progress.
Yeah.
I wish I'd stopped dropping my keys, by the way, but that's not worked out for me. But I am making progress.
How about, although I may be different, I still belong?
Right. I like that one. Or I'm not an exception. My case is not any harder than other people.
How about accepting help is a sign of strength?
Yeah, just what Tim was saying earlier. That's right. It's not an indication that you're weak or bad. It's that you're willing to make improvement and changes in your life.
Yeah, I can recover.
That's right. Yeah. Instead of that old mindset, like, this is too hard for me, this never works, I've tried this before, this is stupid. Don't rehearse those. Try rehearsing, I can recover.
Mm-hmm.
I know some things, but not everything.
Yeah. So you're not stupid, you're not inferior, inadequate, or incompetent. You're making progress, and you do know some things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not arrogant about it, but yeah, and we're gonna take what you know and use that to extend your recovery.
I can be honest.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
How about I care about my health?
Instead of I care about getting high and going back into my addiction. No, let's think that through. You care about your family. You care about your health.
Yeah, those all sound so much better and more helpful to recovery than those common statements of resistance, don't they?
Absolutely. Too many people start the program in a reluctant way. This just causes family members and probation officers to push back. Once a family member feels that you're resistant, they argue all the more, push you all the more. That's going to create more resistance on the client's part. The secret to success is to be willing, don't be reluctant, get involved and choose to be involved. I've decided to make a new run at recovery here. Mm-hmm. I'm not here against my will. I'm choosing a life of recovery, and I've decided to get my life back. I want to create a life where my family and friends, people around me can be proud of what I'm doing, and I can be proud of my recovery.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for listening to today's podcast. We've been visiting with Dr. Hal Baumchen, a licensed clinical psychologist and licensed alcohol and drug counselor. His expertise and clinical wisdom is now available at journeytorecovery.com. Share this resource with your peers and colleagues. I'm Gaylen Morse. Thanks for listening, and see you next time. Remember, recovery is a journey. Enjoy the ride.